I wanted to share my garden app. I built this using AI. I started using Lovable, quickly ran into Edges and switched over to Cursor. I dabbled a little bit in Windsurf as well, but pretty much the framework that I found for building apps as a non-technical person that worked great is I create a light requirements document, sort of an outline or the framework of what I want built out. I build that in Lovable or Firebase, and then I convert it over to Cursor or Windsurf. And that helps me to build things in a more organized way because I'm not technical. So it took me a little bit to kind of figure out file structure, and everything that you have to do when you're using a tool like AI to build. So let's take a look. To start off with, this part was relatively simple. AI just kind of did the thing I asked it to use best practices, it used best practices, and here we are. For a reference, I have specific best practices that I added as a global policy when setting this up. Okay, so the tricky parts for me personally came when I was trying to do data integration. So the initial data here is the NOAA National Weather Service data for your current weather. This was simple. This was delightful. And I thought, hey, it would be great for a garden app. I need to know the historic weather because I need to know what are the things I need to shift as I'm growing. And I don't have that historic data at my fingertips. So enter the chaos when building using AI. So first thing, AI is a big fat liar. So you need to verify. It tells you that it did a thing, verify. Did it actually do the thing, or did it kind of like hand wave around it? And this is particularly relevant when it comes to data. So, as it turns out, I actually just had to figure out Python so that I can pull decades worth of data from NOAA in order to do some of this analysis. But once I figured out that AI was telling me that it was doing it, but it wasn't, and the data was ish close until I really had to dig in and realize, no, this is wrong. It's not actually my experience, which is why narrowing the data down to a set that you're familiar with was amazing. So it basically provides some of the insights that I was after. It includes NOAA data and USDA data. So I know that we get four-ish extra growing days each or every 10 years. And that's fairly significant. It might not sound like a lot, but that's a lot, which means that understanding the temperature shift as well as the growing season shift meant that I absolutely just started weeks too late in order for my spring crop to be successful, which tracks with my experience this year, which honestly is the reason why I did this app. I went through and I added soil analysis, and this data comes from the USDA. Mostly I did it because I could, and it's just data that's available and it's easy to test. I just went to the website and verified that this is what it is for my area. Now, adding spaces seem like it should be basic, but AI struggled every single time. And I don't know if I was prompting wrong or what. So if someone has recommendations, please share. And it basically would say, yeah, I did the thing. I'm like, it doesn't take an action. Yes, it takes an action. No, it doesn't take an action. And we go round and round. And I found that Gemini helps to get out of whatever the loop was. So I try three times. And if I couldn't get the IDE or AI agent, whatever, to do what I expected, I asked Gemini, and that worked out great. Another feature that I struggled with was being able to incorporate multiple data sets. So when doing some planting stuff, you could pick something, let's say broccoli, which is an antagonistic plant. And so I built out a database that basically says for these plants that are antagonistic, this is why they're antagonistic, and it provides a message. So if you have a garden space that is bigger than 3 to 4 feet, you can plant these things together. Just know that there's some issues. Um, let's see. The other areas that I worked on, we're trying to come up with the difference between a garden that is growing crops and a pollinator garden. The logic isn't exactly there to my liking, but it's getting there. So this way you can see crop rotation information as it comes to a pollinator garden. And you're probably thinking, dude, there's not crop rotation. No, there isn't. But there is specific information on how to care for your pollinators, which is you've got to leave the dead stems and foliage until spring because that's where they're napping for the winter. It took a lot of finagling and it's not perfect, but it's definitely getting there. In terms of having an ASCII layout, This this was awesome because I had to go through and train the model as you would expect because it doesn't understand size. So for example, it was telling me that you could have one tomato in a 50-gallon container. 50-gallon containers are roughly a half wine barrel. A half wine barrel, you can grow trees and other flowers hanging out of it perfectly fine. So to say that it only fit one tomato was like, okay. So you have to go through and you have to train it. So that was a new and interesting opportunity. I also have a data set that's full of a bunch of permaculture data, etc., to provide details. It's not great yet in the details in that it's constantly wanting to add things like, and here's where you grow tomatoes and basil. And it's like, no, 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 it's not all about that. So I'm still working through that part. And that's for me just a learning curve and the next thing I need to do. So, in a nutshell, this is pretty much what it does. You can track everything. You can look at crop rotation. You can have timeline activities, which are like make sure that you deadhead stuff so that you continue to have flowers throughout the season. Here's when you harvest seeds, etc. And then it does very similar for the veg. Um, and I think for me, the biggest hangups were items that I thought would be pretty simple for AI to do weren't necessarily simple. And I got a lot more comfortable as I was going through the process using the command line, not only using the command line, but going and looking in Vercel, seeing when things have failed, what might have failed. DNS was a drag and looking at the Postgres database through Supabase and figuring out some of the permissioning. So a lot of it, the way I started with that thin layout gave me the opportunity to dig in and feel comfortable with how to navigate between GitHub, the command line, Vercel, Cursor, etc. And it's actually kind of fun. And I'm working on continuing to tune this and the model. And then I have another climate action one for home, which is so much more data. And it's been wild and fun. And Python also, those spaces, oh my gosh, so mean. But by and large, that's my experience building with AI. If somebody wants to try it, you absolutely can. It's rootandstem.app. Just know that the historic weather data is only based on Portland because I haven't figured out how to do a cron job yet. All right, let me know what you've learned and if you have any tips or tricks for me.